Well, we saw a story that was owned by News Limited newspapers this morning. It was branded an exclusive story, and it was that Scott Morrison would be setting up a tent city. That's what they called it in Nauru, basically expanding offshore detention there in Nauru. There was an interesting disclosure at the bottom of one of the stories, or a couple of the stories in the Australian, which said that the trip had been paid for by a company called Toll.
My understanding is that the trip was wholly privately funded.
Did Toll pay for it?
Look, it's wholly privately funded, and there's no reason whatsoever why it shouldn't be funded in that way.
Toll has multi-million-dollar contracts with the government to provide logistics for asylum seeker arrangements. So this is a company that's already benefiting to the tune. We've just downloaded from Oz Tenders. It looks like being close to $26 million in existing contracts with the government. And they specialise in transporting stuff for remote base camps. So this coalition solution of a tent city appears to be sort of perfectly aligned with Toll Holdings' business model.
They've rushed out with the idea of expanding accommodation on Nauru, which of itself does make sense, and as I say, I've had similar conversations, but they've made some fairly fatal errors in the way they've done it.
Certainly, we've said for a very long time that our plan A has been Nauru. It's worked in the past. We certainly believe it will work again. Scott Morrison has been very thorough in working this through in terms of how we will approach it. He's been very diligent. Obviously, we think it is a better option than PNG that the Labor government has put forward.
I don't doubt, in terms of a media strategy, what Tony Abbott and Scott Morrison have done today is first class. But in terms of doing something about people drowning on the high seas, it's childish. You don't set a limit on capacity. The moment you do that, you give people smugglers a target to fill.
We would be prepared to rapidly ramp up the capacity of Nauru to 2,000 and beyond. That's what we're saying.
To put the figure of 2,000 on it at a time where people smugglers in the current surge have been getting more than 1,000 people in a week, means that effectively the coalition are putting up in lights, if you want to overwhelm the policy, here's how. Grossly irresponsible, and I don't think they would have had to have thought about it for long to realise what a grave error that was.
Stopping the boats, turning them around doesn't work. Why? Because a lot of those people will still end up in Australia and be processed here. So what you can see is that you can drive a truck through. The position that the coalition has been consistently running in Australia for some time now, and that they are now therefore putting all their eggs in the Nauru basket.
I can tell you this, that our policy will be vastly less expensive than Labor's policy, because Labor's policy has already cost us more than $10 billion in border protection blowouts. Now, the cheapest thing to do here is to stop the boats. That's the cheapest thing to do. It's the cheapest thing, it's the best thing, it's the most compassionate thing to do, and we will stop the boats.
Is Papua New Guinea necessarily a better option than Nauru, or are we just looking at two offshore options that are much the same?
I actually think PNG is a better option, because we actually need to find an environment that guarantees people's capacity to seek asylum there in the long term, which could include a migration outcome for those people.